I want to tell you about a moment I had in my early days of trying to practice Stoicism. I'd read the text, I understood the philosophy, or at least I thought I did. I could explain the dichotomy of control, the four virtues, the Stoic account of emotion. I could even have given you a reasonably competent presentation on the foundations of the Stoic system without using a script. And yet I kept finding in some situations that the Stoic tools I'd learned suddenly felt more abstract than practical. It was in my head, but not quite in my hands. I understood it the same way you might understand a book about how to swim breaststroke before you've even been in the water. The thing that changed that was not more reading, it was not finding a better translation or a more precise philosophical commentary, it was writing. Not journaling in the sense of keeping a diary, not recording my feelings or narrating my days, writing in the specific, structured, interrogative way that the Stoics themselves practiced, the way Marcus Aurelius filled his private notebooks, the way Seneca composed his letters to Lucilius, or the way that Epictetus's students were expected to reflect after each session in the school at Nicopolis. There is something that writing does to thought that thinking alone can't replicate. And once I understood what that something was, the practice became non-negotiable. So today I want to show you what it is and how to use it. Welcome back to the Stoic Mind Mechanic. My name is Tim Howell. We're now getting into the practices section of the series, the toolkit that turns philosophical understanding into a lived experience. In our last episode, we explored negative visualization, the deliberate imagining of loss as a path to gratitude and resilience. Today, we're going to look at what many Stoic practitioners consider the single most important daily discipline, journaling. And I need to say immediately, I don't mean journaling in the sense of writing down what happened today and how you feel about it. That has its place, but this is not it. Stoic journaling is a specific, structured practice which is closer to philosophical self-examination than to diary keeping. It's the written counterpart of the Socratic dialogues, a disciplined interrogation of your own mind conducted in private with full honesty and no audience. So let's look at where it comes from, why it works, and what to actually write, and how to build it into a daily practice that doesn't collapse after a fortnight. The practice of written self-examination has roots that predate Stoicism. The Pythagoreans, the philosophical school founded by Pythagoras in the 6th century BC, practiced a nightly examination they called the examination of conscience. Before sleep, the initiate was to review the day in detail, asking 3 simple questions. Where did I go wrong? What did I accomplish? And what did I leave undone? The practice was explicitly disciplinary, not a celebration of a good day, but a systematic audit of where the mind had failed to govern itself. Seneca, writing in his letters, records that he practiced his own version of this nightly, when he says, "When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, aware of the habit that's now mine, I examine my entire day and go back over what I've done and said, hiding nothing from myself, passing nothing by. I still quarrel with myself when I detect that something I've said or done was harmful." Notice the quality of that practice. He's not writing to feel good about himself. He's not building a record of achievements or a gratitude list. He's actually quarrelling with himself and reprimanding himself for where he fell short, but without cruelty, without performance, just the honest, private nightly accounting of a person who takes their own development seriously. Marcus Aurelius took the practice to a different level entirely. His meditations, those private notebooks we touched on in episode 9, are the product of daily writing over at least 2 decades. He wasn't writing to record events, he was writing to reinforce philosophical principles that he found difficult to maintain under pressure. He was writing reminders to himself that he apparently needed to write repeatedly because the pressures of his life kept eroding what study alone had given him. The key insight is this: Marcus didn't write the meditations because he had achieved Stoic mastery and wanted to capture it. Far from it. He wrote them because he hadn't achieved it and needed the writing to keep him pointed in the right direction. The notebooks are the practice, not the product of the practice. That distinction, writing as the mechanism of development, not the record of development, is the most important thing to understand about Stoic journaling before you begin. So here's a question I want you to think about. Why does writing about your experience produce different outcomes than just thinking about it? What does putting words on a page actually do? Well, the first thing writing does is slow down thought enough to examine it. Thoughts move quickly, they arrive as impressions or spark reactions, generate responses, and are gone before you've quite pinned them down. Writing introduces the friction of articulation. You can't write faster than you can formulate, and the formulation process forces the thought to become more detailed. Vague anxieties have to be named. Half-formed judgments have to be completed. The act of writing them down is in itself an act of examination. This is what the Stoics called bringing the impression before the tribunal of reason, the conscious, deliberate examination of what has arisen in the mind. In the language of the Stoics is the practice of synkatathesis, or the discipline of assent given a physical form. When you write down what you're thinking and feeling about a situation, you're not recording a thought, you are examining it. The second thing writing does is create distance. When a difficult experience is held only in the mind, it tends to be experienced from the inside with full emotional immersion. No perspective, no separation between the observer and the observed. When you write about the same experience, something shifts. You move from being inside it to looking at it. Psychologists call this self-distancing, and the research is consistent. Writing about emotionally charged experiences as if you were describing it to a trusted friend, or as Marcus did in the second person, addressing himself as you, reduces emotional intensity and improves the quality of reasoning about the situation. The third thing writing does is create a record. Thought is fleeting and short-lived. The clarity you might have achieved this morning with the precise articulation of where you went wrong, what you value and what you're trying to build, is at risk of being lost come the evening. Writing preserves it, and the act of returning to earlier entries by reading what you wrote, say, 6 months ago, noticing both what's changed and what hasn't, is in itself a form of philosophical stocktake that thinking alone can't replicate. The most common reason people abandon journaling isn't a lack of commitment. It isn't knowing what to write. They sit with a blank page and either write nothing or they write a stream of consciousness account of their day that feels more like venting than examination. Neither produces the philosophical growth that Stoics were after. So here is the framework that the Stoic tradition supports, built from the practices of Seneca, Marcus and Epictetus, and structured into 3 distinct modes. The first mode is the morning entry. Brief, 5 to 10 minutes. Its purpose is not to record what you're thinking, but to set the direction of the day. Marcus's morning review was an intention-setting exercise. What do I want to bring to this day? What difficulties am I likely to face, and how will I respond? What values do I want to express in the specific circumstances I know are ahead of me? So here are some useful morning prompts. What kind of person do I want to be today? Not in general, but specifically, given what I know is ahead of me. Or, where am I most likely to be tested today, and what is within my control in that situation? How about, what is one thing I keep meaning to do that I've been avoiding? What is the real reason I've been avoiding it? The second mode is the evening entry. Slightly longer, 10 to 15 minutes if you can. This is Seneca's nightly audit, not a summary of the day, but an interrogation of it. Where did you fall short of the person you were trying to be? Where did you act from habit or reactivity rather than from principle? Where did you do something well? The aim here is not to celebrate it, but to understand what made it possible. So here are some useful evening prompts. How about, where today did I give energy to something that was not in my control? What could I have done differently? Or, was there a moment when I said or did something I regret? What was the underlying belief or fear that drove it? How about, did I act today in a way that I'm genuinely proud of? What made that possible, and can I replicate it? Or finally, what did I learn today about the world, about other people, or about myself that I didn't know this morning? The third mode is the situational entry. This is not a scheduled entry, but made in response to specific events such as a difficult conversation, a significant decision, a moment of strong emotion, a failure, or an unexpected success. The purpose of a situational entry is to process the event philosophically rather than emotionally, to ask what it reveals about your values and your habits and what it is asking of you. So here's a few useful situational prompts. What exactly happened in the plainest possible language without interpretation? What was my initial response, and what belief or judgment was underneath it? Is that judgment accurate? What would a wiser version of me think about this situation? Or finally, what is this asking of me? What virtue is being called for here? There are 4 mistakes that consistently appear when people begin Stoic journaling, and I've made all of them. So in no particular order, here are those mistakes. The first is writing for an audience. The journal feels at first like something someone else might read, and so you perform it. You write the version of yourself that you'd like to be seen to be, rather than the version you actually are. This produces polished self-presentation, not philosophical self-examination. The remedy is simple and ruthless. Write as if the journal will be burned when you've completed the entry. Write the thing you would not want anyone to read. That's almost certainly the thing most worth writing. The second mistake is using the journal to vent rather than to examine. There's a difference between processing a difficult event and rehearsing grievances. Venting feels temporarily relieving, and it's ultimately unproductive. It reinforces the story you already have about what happened rather than interrogating it. A good sign that you are venting rather than examining is repetition. If you're writing the same complaints in the same terms across multiple entries without reaching any new understanding, you are venting. The remedy is to impose the question, what is this asking of me? That redirects from narration to inquiry. The third mistake is overscheduling. Starting with a commitment to write for an hour every morning and every evening is a sure path to abandonment. The practice that lasts is the practice that's sustainable. 5 minutes in the morning, 10 in the evening. If you have more time and the writing is alive, keep going. But the minimum viable dose is much smaller than most people assume, and hitting that consistently is more beneficial than occasional marathon sessions. The fourth mistake, and the most subtle, is using the journal as self-punishment rather than self-examination. Seneca quarrelled with himself, yes, but not with cruelty. The nightly audit is not a court-martial, it's a calibration. You're not looking for evidence of how bad you are. You're looking for information about where your character needs development. The tone should be something akin to a demanding teacher who cares about you and expects more from you, not that of a prosecutor who expects you to convict yourself. Let's move on now and have a look at the practical setup for journaling, because the tool matters a lot less than people think, but the context means so much more. Paper or digital? It doesn't matter philosophically. But what the research suggests is that handwriting produces marginally better cognitive processing of emotionally complex material than typing, because it's slower and forces more compression and articulation. There's no right or wrong type of physical journal. If you prefer to write in a battered A5 notebook, write in a battered A5 notebook. However, if you feel you'll be more comfortable or consistent using a dedicated app, use that. What does matter, however, is privacy. You can't write honestly if there's any chance that someone else will read what you write. Whatever system you choose, it needs to be reliably private. Marcus's notebooks were private enough that he never expected anyone to read them, and the honesty that privacy allowed is exactly what makes the meditations what they are. What also matters is regularity of time. The practice is most powerful when it's tethered to a fixed point in the day, ideally the same time every day, the same context or the same transition point. Morning entries work best immediately after getting up, before the day's demands begin to crowd your mind. Evening entries work best at the genuine end of the day, and not the point at which you stop work and start scrolling, but the point at which you're genuinely preparing to rest. That's all you need: a private place, a consistent time, and the right questions. Everything else is secondary. I'd like to revisit what I said at the beginning, that writing was what moved Stoicism from my head to my hands. What I mean is this: I could hold the dichotomy of control as an intellectual proposition. I could agree when I was calm and thinking clearly that my judgments were within my power and the external world was not. But in the heat of the moment, when something went wrong, when I was anxious or when I was angry, the proper Stoic response wasn't in the old toolbox. It was either too abstract or too distant from the generic obstacles that I'd studied about. Writing forces specificity. When I write what is up to me in this situation, I have to answer with details, not the theory but the application, not virtue in general but what wisdom looks like in this conversation with this person in this moment. The writing is where the philosophy touches the real world. Marcus Aurelius understood this. He didn't write the meditations to explain Stoicism. He wrote them because without the writing, the philosophy would not stand up to the pressures of the day. The writing was the practice, and the practice was, night after night, the difference between a man who understood virtue and a man who was building it. So your challenge for this episode: at the end of the day, using whatever type of journal you've chosen to use, write 3 sentences. One about where you fell short today of the person you want to be. Remember to be specific, not generic. 1 sentence about where you did not. And 1 about tomorrow, like something you want to pay attention to or something you want to bring. Nothing more. 3 sentences. Do it tonight and then do it again tomorrow night. Try it for 7 days before you decide whether it's useful or not. In our next episode, we're going to look at another of the Stoic daily practices, the morning review. We'll examine how Marcus structured his mornings, what the Stoics believed about the quality of attention you bring to the first hour of the day, and how a specific 15-minute morning practice can set the philosophical tone for everything that follows it. If journaling is the evening's work, the morning review is its counterpart, and together they form the backbone of a sustainable Stoic daily practice. So please like and subscribe if this has been useful. It genuinely helps the channel reach the people who need it, and share the episode with anyone who's ever started a journal and abandoned it. They may just have been missing the right questions. So until next time, keep calm, keep stoic, and I'll see you in the next one.